for the drums.
Hey everybody, this is our first year trying this out. It's a couple of days after the 2023 Tableau conference, and I wasn't at the Tableau conference this year, but I have with me Keith and Robert who were, and we thought we'd have a little conversation about catching up about the conference and where Tableau's going, what we heard, what we didn't hear and wanted to hear, and so on. So just to start out, I'll have Robert, since this is your first time on the podcast, tell us a little bit about yourself and a highlight of the Tableau conference.
Yeah, well, my first conference was certainly exciting because that's when I competed in Iron Viz years and years ago. This one was pretty exciting as well, certainly more so than last year. We were just coming off of the COVID hiatus and, the virtual only thing. So this year I could feel a lot more energy just in general. My big takeaway, there's a couple of things that we'll talk about, but it's pretty clear to me that there's a lot more focus on the data side of things, and that dashboards as the primary or only method of communicating and dealing with analysis, I think they're going to start to take more of a back seat. Or maybe even middle seat. But it's certainly not the only thing that's going to be the tool for communicating insights or even arriving at insights in the future. They're not going to go away, but I think we're going to see some things shove their way into it really fast.
Yeah, so we'll definitely talk more about some of those different announcements and where they might go. So how about you, Keith?
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. I got to say, I didn't want to go to the conference this year. I just was not looking forward to it. I've been in my kind of deep COVID introvert and kind of feeling like maybe I want to move on from Tableau a little bit and move in other directions. And my experience at the conference just turned me around 180 degrees. I really enjoyed my time at the conference. I'm so glad I went. And the flow of the event was really good. I really liked the layout, like the changes in layout where Francois gave the keynote, from the center of the round table instead of up on the big stage. I liked the change of the layout in terms of the big presentation room where you had the silent disco, multiple conference talks all going on at the same time. And it was much more accessible. And I was really pleasantly surprised by the announcements and by the new features. And I was like, wow, there's a lot here. Maybe this story that I had in my head about, Tableau is yesterday's dog in tomorrow's pony show isn't true. And maybe they've still got a foot in this game. And I think we can kind of talk with yourself and Robert about what some of those announcements mean and how they're really going to play out, I guess, when the rubber hits the road.
So with that, seems like there's kind of two threads we could talk about. One, sort of the AI, Tableau GPT end of things. And then there's the other end of the headless BI and what's going on with that. So, and I imagine we'll probably come into a meeting of both. So just to start that out, for you, Robert, which one do you want to start with?
Well, let's start with the AI thing, because that's what I think everybody's talking about, everybody heard about. I mean, it's almost like no one can shut up about it. It's like, all right, really, what else can we say at this point? During the conference, I sort of quipped online about, people are thinking about how's the role of the analyst going to change in all of this? Is AI going to replace a lot of what we're doing? But I question, who's going to train the bots? And I was really surprised, actually, at the response to just that little question. But really, I think that's the meat of what we saw in the keynote. In order for AI to work in a data context, not just a language processing context, we've got to teach it what does this data mean, how does it relate to each other? That's that whole semantic layer thing. It's the data cloud. It's the noodles turning into spaghetti and meatballs. It's the separation of the data layer and the visualization layer. All of those things are putting energy into modeling the data in such a way that it enables a different level of innovation, both with AI and with just innovative new front ends, like we saw, the magic show with the Tableau gestures and mixed reality, all that stuff. It comes down to that data layer, and they're really putting time and investment in that.
How about you, Keith?
Yeah, I would say it comes down to that data layer and where is that thing, and also where are you investing your energy to define the metrics and to define like the business semantic kind of definitions. And I think my key takeaways are that there's a little bit of a bifurcation going on with some of the announcements. Of course, the AI and the generative Tableau GPT got the lead spot and the big kind of like fanfare. But to me, separating the VizQL engine from the user interface and moving towards this headless BI model where, Tableau is a data-driven drawing engine. You've been talking about this, Jonathan, forever. And Noah Salvaterra could build these spinning 3D globes. Like the Tableau VizQL engine can render anything. It's Pixar for your data. And we've always just been constrained by this kludgy user interface where I have to get into nested table calculations and data densification and padding and all this other like nightmarish stuff that prevented me from really using VizQL. And so the way that this bifurcation thing happens is that on the one hand, you've got the Tableau GPT, you've got the Tableau Pulse. Both of those things need a significant investment, it sounds like, into modeling your semantic layer, modeling your metrics layer inside of Tableau, right? And so while those things might check the Gartner box and sound like amazing headlines, I'm not sure they're going to be super useful until you make the investment to model that semantic layer and to model those metrics in Tableau. But then this sort of differs from the headless BI thing where now I can use the Tableau data-driven drawing engine from anywhere, and I could render, visualizations using this headless BI. And as far as I'm aware, I'm only loosely familiar with it. This headless BI trend is actually having us model the semantics and model the metrics upstream in the data cloud where the data is stored, for example, in our Snowflake system. And so where is this going to converge where either we're going to put this huge investment into modeling the semantics and modeling the relationships and using the meatball and building out the metrics layer in Tableau, or we're going to model our semantics and model our metrics upstream for headless BI kind of closer to the source, where the data is in its cloud storage location. Can we do both? And if I invest the energy to model all of that stuff into Tableau, then is it locked up in there and I can't use it elsewhere in other tools? This is kind of an open question for me.
So when I hear that, I wonder what other people might be hearing in terms of who am I going to have to hire? How many people am I going to have to put towards this new data modeling effort? But I think actually the separation of the data layer and the dashboarding layer, even without the extra semantics that come from the data cloud and the noodles and all this stuff that they announced as like an expansion of Tableau data services, even without that, having the data layer sit by itself enables a type of innovation for possibly third parties, but for Tableau themselves. They announced at the conference something that I didn't realize until they said it out loud. Tableau's been around for 20 years now. And the thing that we're using on Tableau Server started with 20 years old technology. And it's been sort of force fit for the web along the way. And they've done really well with it, but it's not really web native. And it's time for a new architecture. Putting the front end away from the back end in that way allows Tableau themselves to re-envision, re-architect their flagship stuff. As well as innovate on AI and augmented reality and all of that whiz-bang stuff.
I'm gonna jump in with being a Tableau old timer on this. That one of the things I remember from way back when, and asking for like, why can't we have such and such a feature, and being told that the reason why was that Tableau pipeline that made it so fast from, oh, I have this question of the data, click and drag, drop it, boom, there's a visualization. That pipeline was so tightly integrated that there were decisions made at step A that affected how dashboards would render at step 55, kind of thing. I went letters and numbers there. It doesn't make sense. And so this decoupling that Tableau has done over time with the in the 20 years, like to enable federated data sources as a step, to enable relationships more recently, to do to even do things like with the map layers from multiple data sources, where a chart is no longer has to be made by one data source. And so I see this decoupling as a natural next step to get us there. And I know Tableau had to do some of that to enable the Sankey charts and the other new chart types that they're enabling, because there was so much in that Viz engine that was just about we're dragging and dropping and generating columns and rows.
Yeah, that's
that
huge.
Had to be different. So it's
I'm a big fan of the decoupling. Like, to me, that was the killer feature that was announced. Never mind the GPT stuff. I'm a big fan of the decoupling. I guess my big question about it is, to what extent is it worthwhile and strategically important to invest in doing all of this modeling of the metrics layer in Tableau, because the Tableau Pulse isn't going to work without it. The Tableau GPT isn't going to work without it. I really like this padded room concept, where in order to prevent the GPT from hallucinating, they're really constraining it to only run from within the padded room where it can be safe. And the GPT will only run on top of your really highly curated metrics layers, where it can't make anything up that's inaccurate. But what that means is this metric layer has to exist first. So to what extent should my team invest our strategic energy into building out this metrics layer? Because I don't know about you, Robert, I haven't seen the metrics layer be very widely used at all yet. So to me, that thing is largely empty. And a lot of these new features that were released, about the Pulse and the GPT require it to exist. And then to what extent should I do that metrics definition in Tableau versus, kind of setting myself up for the headless BI thing? I don't know.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things about that strike me. One, I don't really think I've come across anybody that uses the metrics feature right now. GPT could be implemented on just a regular published data source without that definition of metrics, but still you have to define the data source, publish them, point GPT at, all that sort of stuff. And, the thing is, ideas are easy, and execution is hard. And the details of execution are really something we can't speak to right now. But it's not just a padded room to make sure that you're safe when you're jumping around this experimental space. It's a padded room inside of a bank vault. The reason that it kind of has to work on this semantic layer, because that semantic layer is also your security layer. If the AI engine can get to all the things, then AI has to know, who am I allowed to talk to when we're using some kind of a chat interface or what have you. So that whole process is for security as much as it is trustworthiness and so on.
So one question I have about that goes to the this kind of level of effort piece is that so historically Tableau's been a low code environment, definitely not no code, but a low code environment. And yet when we saw the VizQL demo, for example, that was XML that we were seeing in that piece. And the chat GPT piece is low code, or is certainly plain language, but then what what do we have to do with the semantic layer to get that there? So do you have any thoughts on kind of that? What is that level of effort to reward?
Right now, I don't know. I'll tell you that what we saw at the conference, I went to a deep dive session all about Tableau GPT and Tableau Pulse and how that works under the hood. And I kid you not, he pulled up a command line interface and we saw the terminal scrolling with text. And so it's still at the code level right now. We don't know what that user interface is really going to look like when it comes out.
Yeah.
So it's not something I can talk intelligently to right now. We'll wait and see.
Yeah, and I think that same session that Robert's talking about, I hope that that's one of the ones that's available to watch after, because I was there too. And I was just like, I just want to go watch this again. And so that particular session where he brought up the command line, he showed some really fancy stuff that was a little bit fragile and a little bit not ready for production use yet, but shows where the direction is going. And it's all really fancy. But the main point is we have to wait and see. And I mean, at this moment, it really is the determining factor is what does it mean for the analyst on the ground, right? Because Tableau has been consistently short on providing new features for the analyst, making our lives any easier. And I'm not certain that any of these stuff that was announced is set up to make our lives easier. I'm yet to see. I mean, here we are talking about, advanced intelligence and this new era that's coming in, but I can't do a federated join or a relationship to a Tableau server published data source. And so to what extent is all of this new stuff just going to make the poor little analyst on the ground, which is you and me, kind of continue to do more, peddling of the duck underneath the water in order to make it look like the system is really smart, but actually we don't have enough time in the day.
Exactly. The magic of things like ChatGPT and why there's so much excitement about it is that, when I go in and use that interface, I didn't have to do anything to teach it anything. Somebody else did that, and it just did it by scraping everything that it could possibly read and running its models. Not an easy task, but the thing is, we can do that with language because we have dictionaries, we have thesaurus, we have things that explain what words mean. Do we have that same thing for databases, for all of your company information? Do we have the equivalent of a thesaurus for all of the tables in your data warehouse? I think probably not. When you talk to translators working with languages around the world, they talk about these low resource languages and how difficult it is when they don't have enough examples to use in order to build a translation scheme. I think that's the problem we're going to run into when it comes to organizational data. It's kind of a low resource language. It's a different language than these magical things like ChatGPT. But as soon as you put the GPT on it, our mind goes there. I don't think that's where it is.
So that kind of goes to a question I have, because I'm in my daily work, I'm still primarily at the analyst level and working in an environment that doesn't have highly conformed, well-governed data sets by and large. And so one of the things I wonder about is, like, to what degree will some of these tools enable organizations that have invested in their data governance and the preparation and creating the data warehouse that has access to all the data to advance really fast? And then those organizations that haven't done that yet, do they get to take advantage of this too, or are they left behind to some degree in this new way of doing things?
I'm only guessing, but my best guess is that they're going to be closer to left behind, because the GPT can write SQL, but it can't write SQL if your data model's a total mess, right? And to me, what I'm gathering from all of this large language models thing is that the real power comes from having a controlled vocabulary, and it's actually the reading and the learning of code and programming and syntax languages that it's more powerful at. And so for those companies that have made that investment, in order to produce a tidy, groomed, curated corpus of structured, language-oriented information in order to feed into those models, to me, they're going to have a much head start on the other companies that just have kind of a big mess everywhere.
Tableau's calling their new stuff the meatball. Let's face it, it's spaghetti. That's what it's going to be.
Mm-hmm. In what way?
Well, the noodle thing offered a different kind of relationship model. And now the relationships can go multiple places in multiple directions. And you're just going to get a lot of noodles tangled up together. And if you don't really have a well-structured underlying data management scheme, you're going to end up with some tangled messes.
Yeah. And so then I could see, where the evolution of our career paths are going. To me, the day of building in Tableau desktop as sort of a defining feature of who I am as a professional is long over, right? Like Luke Stanky gave a presentation that was great about how to build fancy tables, and he could build these crosstabs in Tableau using map layers, but he had 16 blog posts in his arsenal as reference material, and there was an accelerated video in his presentation that did the click-through build of 45 minutes of building. Like, those days are over. Like, to me, anybody who is defining their career in the way that you and I defined our career over the last 10 years of building Tableau data visualizations and dashboards, those days are numbered. But where is it then that we're evolving? I don't believe we're all going to lose our jobs. To me, it seems like it's evolving in this direction of solving the spaghetti bowl, right? The people who know how to model data, right? Like the areas that you want to take us into in the future of this podcast, Jonathan. How do we model analytics-ready data models that have the correct relationships, the correct noodles, the correct meatballs, in order to support the answering of the business questions that we want to answer? That, to me, is one real career path direction that we're all, those of us who are willing and able, just going to be rewarded and incentivized. And there's going to be a big demand for modeling data, modeling out this metrics layer, modeling out these relationships and metrics. And then the other one is this.
Can I add one thing to that? Yeah, just in that piece that I think in all of that, there's still the piece in these models of how the models don't exist on their own. So there's the models in relation to the businesses and the organizations we're trying to support. And there's also the models in relation to the tools that we're using as well. So there's still that place. There's still going to be some place of like, how do we build the right model? And to Robert's piece around the meatball, how do we make it work well in Tableau and get the answers that are accurate and timely and support our business?
And then
questions?
I would go back to my bifurcation. Where do we put it? Do we put it in Tableau, or do we model it upstream for the headless BI thing?
Right. Yeah, remove that in Tableau part of the phrase. Yeah. I think there will come a day, envisioning that future, there may be a day where AI is smart enough to do some of its own modeling or to help us with that modeling process. I sort of saw where Tableau's trying to use that to at least give some hints inside of the data cloud. Those days aren't here yet. It's going to take a while and a lot of learning about what is this new world of semantic layering before we get there. But I do think that there could come a day where AI itself doesn't really need as much of a model anymore.
One question I have on the Tableau GPT that I didn't get from watching the keynote is it two-way? In the sense of, like, if I'm in a Chat GPT session, I can tell Chat GPT, hey, you're wrong about this, and it will correct itself and incorporate that. If in the context of a Tableau GPT session, I'm like, well, actually, these two things, my personal favorite example is working with somebody in they had data that had Brooklyn and Brooklyn space NYC. And Tableau sees those as different.
Mm-hmm. Right.
If Tableau GPT sees those as different, and I tell Tableau GPT those are the same, is Tableau GPT then smart enough to add that into the semantic layer for the future?
I don't know the answer to that, but it does prompt for me another question that I was asking. This Tableau GPT, just like Slack GPT, is running on the baseline engine from Einstein. I'm really curious about the competitive landscape and what it's going to look like when Power BI releases their GPT because of the massive investment that Microsoft have made in OpenAI.
Oh, yeah.
And to what extent is the differentiation in actual GPT technology going to kind of affect the industry and the competitive landscape? Given that Slack GPT and Tableau GPT are both running against Salesforce's Einstein, that does have OpenAI technology underneath it. But what does it look like then when Microsoft introduces their approach to this thing inside of Power BI?
Yeah. Well, to jump off of that competitive landscape thing, the person who invented the predecessor to Salesforce, Einstein, and sold it to them, now has a new idea that he was promoting at the conference. Talked with him a little bit, called Able, AIBLE.com. Go check it out. But, there are competitors out there like him, visionaries thinking about how do we apply AI to data in a different way. And maybe they'll do it better than Salesforce does. Maybe somebody else will do it better. Maybe Microsoft, maybe even Google. I think there's going to be a lot of competitive ideas, and we don't know yet who's going to have the best execution of those ideas.
Yep. That Jonathan, I think to answer your question about, my experience at the conference, my biggest takeaway was that this was definitely a landmark conference in the old format of the Tableau conference, where everything was oriented around Tableau desktop, Tableau server. What could you do with the next right-click feature that they had built? Those days are just done. And now is this big shakeup where we get to ride this rodeo and discern over time as this competitive landscape evolves, how is it that the rubber is meeting the road?
And there were a lot of people at this conference. This was their first time. This was their first introduction to what is a Tableau conference. So unlike us, they're not comparing it to the old days of Tableau. This is what it is to them.
Yep. Good point.
It does feel like a new phase of things.
Yep. So one piece for me with Tableau GPT, they did the demo of the doing the regular expression, which I know in one sense is an easy demo for an AI tool to do, but still, that's huge, having fought with way too many regular expressions over the years. One question for me with that is, there's always been this thing with Tableau of, okay, Tableau's spitting out this number to me. How to get to that number? What is the lineage of that number? And to what degree, with what you saw at the conference, is Tableau helping us trust what Tableau is doing more?
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about here, Jonathan, is the explainability of a number that you get inside of Tableau, right? Like one of the main difficulties with the, and this is where I think the decoupling of the user interface from the VizQL engine is just huge. Like I'm so excited about that, because a lot of that explainability problem comes from the fact that I'm trying to get my number accurate when it's obfuscated by the chart and it's obfuscated by the order of operations. And I'm spending all of my time, inside of my head, which is an error-prone human head, trying to get the numbers to be accurate, but through a chart and through a graph. And so this decoupling of the VizQL engine from the user interface, I think opens up a completely new era that can help with the explainability problem, because later when somebody says, where do you get that number? I don't know. I got to say, well, it's because these three filters are in the context, and it's because of this, table calculation that's running on top of this nested level of detail expression that crosses a relationship, and there's not a measure in the view. Like that is a very, very difficult question to answer. Whereas if we can go the headless BI approach, get our metrics defined, or the padded room Tableau metrics layer approach, in either case, what we're doing is we're getting the explainable numbers to be accurate, and then we're putting the GPT and the Tableau Pulse and the dashboards on top of that really curated, tidy metrics layer that's known to be good.
We went through that whole list of things that we would have to explain in terms of lineage, and that's before you even get to the ETL layer and how did it get shoved into the database in the first place. So,
Yes.
I long for the day when we have a... just like we have web crawlers to find all the web pages on the internet. Boy, what about a database crawler that just goes through your entire company and says, this is where all the data lives?
Yeah. That's a place where there's been the cataloging engines that have tried to do that, but I haven't had experience with those. Related to that piece, Salesforce has the Salesforce Data Cloud powered by Hyper. What were people's reactions to that?
Can I give you mine?
Sure.
I'm a skeptic. I look at that thing and I see Salesforce believes themselves to be a 800-pound gorilla, and that they can just decide that they're going to become a federated cloud-based data warehouse solution and just enter that space. But I don't necessarily see their expertise being in that area. They're a CRM company. They've had a lot of their growth through acquisitions, and they have acquired their way into this Frankenstein of stuffed animals. And certainly they can, declare this is what we're going to do and open the door for business and get customers. But Salesforce as a company, their ability to execute under the hood on actually building a thing that functions well, I'm not sure that they can do it. I don't see them as being fundamentally a data company, and I see them as being rather a CRM company that's really good at marketing and really good at taking the money that they've made marketing CRM and acquiring other companies. I'm not necessarily sure that makes them qualified to build a data cloud. And so I'm a skeptic of that whole thing.
Agreed.
Okay. I'm in the space where I guess I got to say I'm a skeptic too. Like I'd like to see them have some they talk some big numbers, but okay, what are real customer use cases where there's customers willing to come forward about what they did on it? Yep.
They've got big competition.
Yeah, and I would say big competition from other competitors who that kind of thing is their core expertise, and also have a larger runway and have been working on it already for many years.
The other piece to me that's kind of a question with that is the modular versus integrated solution. Because if I'm using a tool like DBT for semantic modeling, and then I'm putting Tableau on top of it or doing this and that, then I'm in that modular kind of solution space. And what Salesforce is pushing is that more integrated, that integrated kind of solution, which to what degree organization is going to be willing to use Salesforce for everything.
The customer 360. Yeah. To what extent is your enterprise going to be willing to kind of buy into the entire package of the Salesforce suite of offerings? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
They see themselves as the big whales in the sea that's going to swallow everything up, and I don't see that working for them long term.
Yeah. All right. So thanks for doing this. This has been a great conversation, and I figured why don't we wrap up with a few quick fire questions?
Okay.
That sound good? All right.
Let's do it.
So we'll do Robert then Keith.
Okay.
Okay. Favorite session at the conference?
I got to go Iron Viz. I mean, the first timer 1 year using Tableau and he wins. How can that not be my favorite?
Awesome.
Yeah, I went to a hands-on training session about maps and geospatial stuff, and I really enjoyed kind of rolling my sleeves up with those things.
Great. Best swag.
My name tags. Oh, I had so much fun with that.
Robert Ross's name tags. Yeah.
So for those of you, oh, very nice.
Yes.
Can you step back a little
Yes.
further, Keith, so we can see it? That's the Action Analytics jacket. Very nice.
Very stylish.
Yeah, I got a lot of compliments on that guy.
Very cool.
Yeah.
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 And for those of you who didn't know, I saw this on Twitter. Apparently, the names on the name tags were very, very small, causing lots of staring at chess, which nobody likes. And Robert had a printer with him and was printing out large names for the name tags. So that was great
Big
community
awesome name
service, Robert.
tags. Yeah.
Yep.
Glad to help.
Yeah. So someone you met at the conference that you want to follow on Twitter or Mastodon or whatever social media, Tableau Public.
Spent some time with Annie Nelson. Didn't realize she had such a huge following on TikTok and LinkedIn. She's not part of the Twitter community that so many of us old timers are accustomed to. So I hadn't discovered her before, but she's got a lot of great content about how she became a data analyst. A fascinating story.
That's great. We'll provide a link to that. How about you, Keith?
Yeah, I had a wonderful, just kind of casual encounter over lunch with a fellow named Josh Wilson, who's an independent now. He used to be at Deloitte, and I'm not going to remember his last name. A fellow named Jason, who was the previous head of product market research of market research at Tableau, and has now also departed out on his own. And I'd like to follow up with both of those guys.
Great. And last one, something that you learned at conference that you'd love for other people to know.
You know, I don't have
If
a
you
quick
get-
answer for that one.
Okay.
That's a tough one. Yeah, that's a tough one for me too. I would say everything that we've just talked about in the recent half hour.
Yep.
It can be really challenging, especially for all of those people who are newcomers, first timers to the conference, and or maybe you're an executive and you're not hands-on deep in the tech. I think both of those two audiences are looking primarily at the headlines. You know, they're reading the big feature announcements, and it can be easy for them to sort of be fish hooked into believing one thing is true or not another. And so I would say my biggest answer is the manner in which we, in this conversation, have parsed apart our thoughts on how to interpret those announcements and how to really kind of what are the things to keep your eye on as the new kind of technology platform and architecture and industry trends continue to evolve.
Yep. Great. All right. Well, thank you both, and we'll see you next year or thereabouts.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan, for getting us together for this interview. I'm hopefully this can be the first of various other future season 2 episodes that we can start to get out in there and help people with what we're working on.
Totally.
All right.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Action Analytics.